Good afternoon. How are you? I can't hear your voice. Can you unmute yourself? Hi, Ravi.
Hi Santosh, can you hear me now?
Very well, but I can't see your video.
Okay, just switching on. Yes. Is it okay now?
Very nice to see you now.
Yeah, good to see you on this important day.
Same here.
Uh,
Same here.
I was wondering that this being the International Women's Day, this session panelist is quite non-women.
I tried to get women,
Yeah.
but I found that everybody was busy in their women empowerment panel.
Okay.
That was the reason.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's a good observation. But we have our own organizer is women.
Yeah, okay.
So we are not going dry.
Good,
We have our representative.
Very good.
Namaskar, sir. Welcome you on the board.
Thank you. मैं जुड़ गया हूँ.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. आवाज सब में आ रही है?
Regarding the women's panel, as I was listening to all of you, Sharda ma'am from Kerala Local Self-Governance is with us to represent women.
That's right. Oh, very good.
On that note, I will start with today's welcoming all the presenters and all the delegates and the participants for today's webinar. So today we have gathered here to discuss on bringing Atmanirbharta in capacity building. So this is the part of the webinar series of bringing Atmanirbharta in the DRM mechanism. So this is the fifth and final of the series. And capacity building is one of the very dearest topic of NIDM as well as an important aspect of DRM. So on that note, we will be starting with our webinar. For today's webinar, we have with us our patron, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal sir, Executive Director of NIDM, our chief guest, Shri Vyasji, Vice Chairman of Bihar State Disaster Management Authority. He would be giving today's special address. We also have with us Srimati Sharda Muralidharan, Additional Chief Secretary of the Local Self Department at Government of Kerala, Dr. Kamal Lochan Mishra, Executive Director of Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, Government of Odisha, and Professor Ravi Sinha, Department of Civil Engineering from IIT Bombay. So I welcome all the delegates, and I once again welcome Professor Santosh Kumar sir, who is the convener of this program and who has conceptualized this program to welcome all the delegates and give the opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, am I audible? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, audible. You are audible.
Thank you.
Very good. Indeed, it's a great day. It is International Women's Day of March, and where NIDM is hosting this particular webinar, other than other webinars which we had in the morning, talking about development, and we are talking about now the capacity development, where this issue would also be flagged, that how when we talk about capacity development is the need of our, we talk about. And as Mohana has mentioned that this particular webinar is rightly focused on the capacity development, Atmanirbhar Bharat in risk management, where we are talking about this is the fourth in the series and the last one. we are Executive Director in NIDM. As you Chairman of the Bihar State Disaster Management Authority. We have Srimati Sarda Muralidharan, Additional Chief Secretary of the Local Self-Government. She is from Kerala. We have also Professor Ravi Sinha from the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. And we have Kamal Executive Director of the OSDMA, Odisha State Disaster Authority. This designing, we had a discussion with General that how we should be looking into and what kind of challenges it's offered when we talk about almost 1.3 crores of the government servant all alone. If you take all state, the state government and the national government alone, we have a 60 lakhs of employee working at a different level. Similarly, every state government is having minimum of 5 to 10 lakhs employees are working at different levels. And if you take that initiatives taken for the capacity development initially, that we had many of the programs back in state government and state government for the initiative. And still we find there is huge gap in the human resource development. We find capacity, talk about resource in terms of institute, in terms of resource capacity, talk about the structural capacity, then talk about structural capacity. And all these capacity will have a very, very kind of engagement of the institutions. That what is where we have to capacity, and that capacity should be reflected in disaster response, management of relief, management of immediate recovery, build back better long-term recovery and reconstruction, and so on and so forth. And every state has its own nuances. When we talk about effective disaster response, the capacity development program should be designed moving ahead. And NIDM created, took this initiative of capacity development, interaction with the state government, and we engage with the institutions, universities, and all where General Bindal will be talking about that what kind of initiatives which we have taken and what would we would be intending to. So, so that was the idea, and at different level we have the human resource at the public policy level, at the middle level management, and also at the cross-cutting level. That too at the national level, state level, and also at the local government level. Then comes to the community. So this is a full paradigm of capacity development. So how kind of a capacity do we need? And if you are looking at the National Disaster Management Plan of 2019, we have 30 objectives to be achieved. And how that 30 objectives, and suppose we talk about 5 and 6 objectives here in the initial introduction, like say that understanding of hazard, risk, and vulnerability, that itself requires big capacity. Every state or every district in the state start looking at risk management, to the mapping of this. What is local capacity for drafting such kind of HRV analysis. Secondly, we talk about risk and resilience, how kind of integrated into all the development planning. So what is the capacity of the every sectoral planner or sector disaster risk reduction of the which they are envisaging. India itself is thinking of $10 trillion economy, and now by 2030 and by 2050, the $10 trillion in investment in infrastructure. So whether those infrastructure would survive or what kind of a resilience would be built in. So also like build fiscal and financial instruments. So what kind of a capacity is required for building financial instruments and so on and so forth. I was just flagging all these things to understand and comprehend that what we are going to discuss today. And in the panel, we have those senior officials who have been dealing with the capacity development as a fundamental, the kind of engagement in disaster risk reduction. So I take this opportunity to welcome all the distinguished panelists, including Executive Director of NIDM and all the participants who have joined so far in our deliberations, which is touching 100 mark. In the morning, we did discuss about the children's capacity and the children risk, 38 crore, that how the children's capacity could be built when especially focused to the child-centric DRR. Then we also had another webinar on how that women leadership can be brought in as the Prime Minister agenda of number 3. So even if you wish to implement 10-point agenda of the Prime Minister, taking all these into cognizance and the DM Act and the plan, national plan, how we think we are planning. So for that, we have panelists and set of distinguished delegates who are joining. So I would request at this point of time, Sri General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Executive Director of NIDM, who has long experience in handling disasters, especially I would say that response and how those nuances of capacity, even if you talked about building disaster response, as an head of the NIDM, how he thinks and taking the agenda of capacity development forward when the large number of people to be trained and what would be the critical mass. So Executive Director NIDM, General Manoj Kumar Bindal, who is a VSM, Business Environmental, and long experience of working, I said, in the different scenario with the United Nations and also in India and Bhuj earthquake, in Kashmir flood, and so on and so forth. So I request General Manoj Kumar Bindal to kindly address and flag some issues and the plan which you wish to carry forward in the times to come. General Bindal, please.
Thank you, Professor Santosh Kumar. First of all, Jai Hind to everyone, all the participants who have joined, and the esteemed panelists who are here from various states, who are taking out the precious time to deliberate on such an important topic, because building on the local capacity and initiative is the framework on which the whole disaster management can be made more resilient. We know that disasters have had a very huge social and economic cost to the country, and therefore investing in the capacity development at national level is very likely to contribute substantially to safer development by considerably reducing the disaster-related losses and costs in the country. Thus, a truly robust and rewarding capacity development strategy has to be based on an informed understanding of the country context and has to be need-based and demand-driven. As the key to effective disaster management and disaster risk reduction lies in safe and sustainable development, mainstreaming DRR into development is seen as being critical to long-term gains in effective mitigation. The Disaster Management Act 2005, the National Policy on Disaster Management 2009, and the National Training Policy 2012 have already set the broader policy context for devising a training and capacity development policy and strategy for disaster risk reduction in India. State-level DM acts and policies in some states as Gujarat, Bihar, Orissa, West Bengal, Arunachal Pradesh, etc., they have created a favorable policy environment at the state level to pursue organizing and capacity building efforts. But challenges related to putting the policy into practice as intended remain to be addressed. Multi-stakeholder partnerships have emerged involving multilateral and bilateral aid agencies and international NGOs. Presence and participation of interagency groups, IAGs, in coordination with disaster management and disaster risk reduction activities, including training and capacity development activities in many states, are a case in point that we need to study. UNDP defines capacity development as the process through which individuals, organizations, and societies obtain, strengthen, and maintain the capabilities to set and achieve their own development objectives over time. Simply put, if capacity is the means to plan and achieve, then capacity development describes the way to those means. Capacity development commonly refers to a process that is driven from the inside and starts from existing capacity assets. Capacity building, however, refers to the process that supports only the initial phase of building or creating capacities, often by outsiders, and is based on an assumption that there are no existing capacities from which to start, or it is at a very low level. It is therefore less comprehensive than capacity development. Developing sustainable DRR capacities at national and local level is generally based on a few assumptions like locally generated, owned and sustained capacity is essential to the success of any DRR enterprise. The development of DRR capacity is the concern of an entire society rather than of a single agency, professional discipline, or stakeholder group. The development of technical capacities associated with professional disciplines or functions such as environmental management or land use management needs to be combined with other types of capacity development that include the promotion of leadership and other managerial capacities and performance enhancing measures. And also there must be an enabling environment which has got a strong political ownership and commitment at the highest level of authority, extensive participation, transparency, and clear public accountability, and this is essential for translating capacity into performance. So capacity development includes, but is not limited to training. Significant non-training factors such as policy, strategy, work culture, enabling environment, infrastructure, finance have a major bearing on the capacity to perform and produce results. So considering the importance that the communities play in reducing the vulnerabilities and responding to the early recovery phase of any disaster, the Disaster Management Framework of India has identified community-based capacity building as an important element. So it has got five main important elements as was proposed by Van Wassenov in 2006 that says they have to be in place to provide effective relief. They are the capacity building should be the primary focus, and this it should also be based on good selection, providing training to the people who are capable of planning, coordinating, acting, and intervening when necessary. Knowledge management, where the organizations responding to disasters are compelled to operate in a turbulent, fast-changing environment. Knowledge management systems that will be useful in disaster response must be flexible enough to handle unexpected situations in degraded or complex environment. Then the process management, which includes risk assessment, need assessment, supplier selection, strategic planning, fleet management, last mile delivery planning, and other operations which are associated with it. And also we have the resource management, multi-stakeholder management. So education on disaster prevention and response is a must. And it includes educating the vulnerable communities as well as the population of the state to the possible hazards and the impact in the area, as also in a multi-hazard scenario. Mock drills, uh, they need to be practiced several times, and they help in improving the cohesiveness of the community during any emergency. Household preparation, very important that in place of, in addition to mock drill, the households also must be prepared to keep all valuables in waterproof bags, keeping minimum clothing, being ready with a plan of evacuation from their house, keeping in plan the overall evacuation plan of the society or the community there. And understanding the messages, de-warning messages. There's no point in giving dissemination a lot of messages unless the people understand. So easy to use messages have to be developed, and the people, the community should be able to understand it. All that is possible by regular practice and awareness programs. So capacity building for disaster preparedness and response in context of cyclones in Odisha, we have seen it helped in reducing the casualty to negligible in 2013 Fallon cyclone, which occurred post the 1999 super cyclone, where large number of casualties were observed. And in the recent cyclone Fani, the casualties was less than 10. So the main lessons which uh, were learned for implementing capacity building initiatives was that community members are better aware of cyclone risks in their communities. The cyclone mechanisms are reinforced through training, about raising awareness about safety measures and disaster drills, exercises. Communities' cyclone preparedness and response capacities were increased through developing disaster management plans and DCA risk mapping. So NDRF preparedness, Orissa disaster rapid action force preparedness, pre-positioning them in different strategic locations. So it brought out that only a relief-centric approach is not sufficient to handle a disaster of a large magnitude. In this connection, the government of India recognizes that a better prepared community is a key to effective disaster risk reduction and has been striving to take the agenda forward to strengthen community risk resilience in the country. Uh, Capacity building is an ongoing process that equips officials, stakeholders, the community to perform their functions in a better manner during a crisis or like disaster. In the process of capacity building, we must include elements of human resource development, like individual training, organizational development, such as improving the functioning of groups and organizations, and institutional development. At the national level, the National Institute of Disaster Management is the capacity building arm, and the states have disaster management cells in the state administrative training institutions who perform the functions of capacity building for effective and efficient disaster management. So in addition, there are a number of other training institutions which are engaged in training and capacity building in the area of disaster management. So to finish off, I will say that capacity building will no doubt contribute in providing the needed social services, healthcare, education, and the arts that improve the well-being of the community and on which many people depend. Capacity building develops human potential that results in overall human security and development at community level. Since risk associated with natural disasters cannot be reduced due to the fact that the natural disasters are certain to strike, but we can minimize the adverse effect of these disasters through maximizing our own capacity. Capacity building is thus important because the evaluation process coupled with the implementation component help ensure sustainability and resilient communities. With this, I'll end my talk, and I am keen to hear the experts and their experiences that they have faced in their respective states and respective fields as to how we can bring self-sufficiency in capacity building. Thank you so much, and over to you, Professor Santosh.
Bindal, for highlighting the need as a capacity development for overall. It's not that as a kind of training and capacity building alone, but is a kind of a holistic one, and it should be a result oriented. And the effectiveness lies only when we get the result. As you mentioned about that, the India's in the context of India's vulnerability, that the multi-hazard approach is the requirement, and how we are approaching the problem that is to be seen, and how effectively can be applied in the times to come. It did mention about the mock drills and the continuity, household preparedness, plan for evacuation, in the engagement of institution, and formalizing these kind of events on a regular basis as not kind of a one-time event. And recurrence of that institutional role, starting from at the local level to the community-based disaster management. And also you have highlighted about this ATI's role, Administrative Training Institute, and other organizations which are working at the state level and how they can perform a very proactive role in terms of building capacity and high quality of human resource. Thank you very much for highlighting all these issues. And I'm sure when we close, we will have much more at our plate to carry forward. That we have to listen, and that we have the technical people also on the board, and those who are handling that administrative institutions, also in the helm of affairs of disaster management and building. Thank you again, General Bindal, Executive Director of NIDM, for the keynote at this point of time. Now I would request Shivaji, who is currently Vice Chairman of the Bihar State Disaster Authority and working for the last 35 years in different positions of the governance. And in that also at the later phase of the career, he got into the risk governance, being the Principal Secretary of Disaster Management, and also later became as the Honorable Vice Chairman of the Bihar State Disaster Authority. Coming from the 1982 batch of the Indian Administrative Service of Bihar Cadre, and prior to that, in 1980, he worked also as an Indian Police Service. Earlier, he was in Police Service, and later into. And he is a very widely traveled person in terms of US, Europe, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and so forth. And his engagement in the Sendai Framework Draft Committee when the Government of India delegation went there. And after coming from there, Bihar was the first state under his leadership who brought that into the transformation, that how Sendai Framework can be taken as the translated at the state level, where the helm of affairs are there in terms of building capacity or risk reduction. So I take this opportunity to welcome Sri Vyasji for this particular session and webinar where large number of people are there listening to you, and they are looking forward that what kind of your experience of being so long in the administration. You know the administrative challenges also, that how much training and capacity building is seen in the government, the priority. And when you joined as a DRR person, as a vice chairman, also principal secretary DRR, whether it was a contradictory in the kind of approach of the government and also in the approach of the DRR. So all these mixed experience which you have, and where that you succeeded very well in many fronts. So we would like to listen to you, and on behalf of NIDM, I welcome you, and floor is yours, sir. Please, sir, to address the audience, please.
Thank you, Santoshji. Let me know how much time you are assigning to me. How much time should I
We
take?
can, then we will have a second round of the discussion answer.
Okay, I will try to finish my presentation in 15 minutes. So, I welcome all fellow panelists and the guests who are present over there, and a very good afternoon to all. Today is the International Women's Day, and the whole world is celebrating this momentous occasion. So I congratulate all the women and those who are working in the field of DRM, and which includes also the vulnerability aspect, and so far as the villages are concerned mostly. So this is a very opportune moment when we are to discuss about the DRM and capacity building. Now let me start with the Santosh Kumar's last word when he said that about Sendai framework he talked about. I'll start by saying that what is the purpose of capacity building exercises? It seems to me that Sendai provides the answer, though we are discussing in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat. But in my opinion, the disasters know no boundaries. For example, this pandemic, which has affected whole of the world, we have to fight this pandemic together. But anyway, it's the government's policy that we have to talk about Atmanirbharta. But this capacity building has to be understood in the context of the Sendai. Sendai gives certain targets to be achieved in a phase of say 15 years. So what is the purpose of that capacity building? That is the first question which I like to discuss with you. I mean, Sandy says that we have to reduce the mortality rate. We know that lot many people are perishing because of disasters. So it's really very important to kind of control that mortality, which is very, very, in some states is very, very wide, some states is less in number. For example, the other day we were celebrating, not celebrating, observing what is known as Road Safety Month. And during Road Safety Month, a lot of deaths and a lot of, injuries, they occurred on Indian roads. In my state of Bihar, during that very time, we heard a lot of stories, a lot of accidents, and a lot of people perished in spite of the fact that we were making people aware about that accident. So the most important purpose of any capacity building exercise is to aim at reducing the mortality. And second one is reducing the number of people affected by disasters. If the number is increasing, then I don't think that we have succeeded in building the capacity, of the people or of the responders. Communities also respond to the first responders. So we are not capable of kind of building the capacity to such an extent that the number of persons who are affected are reduced. So second aspect is that reduction in the number of people affected by disasters is another aim of the capacity building. And the third one, sorry, and the third one is economic losses. A lot of economic losses happen. Houses are perished, roads are broken, various infrastructure they are broken. So reduction in the economic losses, is very important. So Sandy gives us these three kind of purposes which should be taken into account while working out for any capacity building. And from these three, and if we combine it with the DRR concept, it means that a society has to be resilient to the disasters. It means we have to build a culture of resilience. The basic purpose is that if a culture of resilience is not there, then as Major General Bindal says, then disaster management would only become relief management. We in the state of Bihar, I think everywhere as well, when we were working in the districts, it was very clear that people wanted relief and government wanted to give relief, give more. People would require more and more relief, they will demand more and more relief. Then the state would be, the Mai Baap, because the state can provide the relief, not anything prior to the relief. So the whole concept of disaster management became relief centric. Now we are talking about the disaster risk reduction centric, and we are talking about the resilience. So it's very important to understand this very concept of capacity building in the context of the changed environment in which we are now talking about the disaster risk reduction and disaster management. We are not talking merely about the relief. But it's very difficult to ensure that this relief mindedness, the relief centeredness, in fact, is vast from the minds of even the community as well as from the governments and the government agencies. Considers that relief is the most visible aspect. In any disaster situation, if relief is being distributed, it is most visible, and if I am permitted to say, it fetches votes. It fetches votes to the politicians and it fetches laurels to the officers. People say, Jindabad Sahab, tunne itna zyada hamare liye kar diya. But the fact remains that unless until you create the culture of resilience, the relief is not going to solve the problem, which we have learned in a very hard way. I belong to this very state. I'm working in this very state, which is mostly flood prone. 28 districts out of 38 are the flood prone, and flood is a recurring phenomena which occurs annually. It's the annual kind of phenomena. Every year we face floods here or there. There are a lot of rivers. All of you may be aware about that. So if the culture of resilience, it means we have to build the capacity right from the grassroots to the national level. state level and national level both. And we have to analyze what would be the role of the national level institutions and the state level institutions to build this grassroots capacity. Unless and until the grassroots level capacities are built, there won't be any culture of resilience. Please please excuse me by saying, these hard facts. The people have to be resilient. The community has to be resilient, and the government officers have to ensure that they take all the possible endeavors through this capacity building exercises to make people resilient and to make people understand the benefit of this culture. Now, this capacity building, in my opinion, includes certain softwares, certain hardwares. Whether General Jinder talked about, some of the softwares. They are certainly the policies, plans at what level? I don't know whether the national level plan was ever discussed with the states. It was not discussed, at least with me. That I can say. I just got a copy that a national level plan has been prepared, but my state was not consulted. That time I was principal secretary, in the department, and I was never consulted, and I don't think BSDMA was ever consulted. But the issue is that there should be plans at panchayat level, at the village level, by involving the villagers, because the villagers understand what kind of risks they have to face, what kind of risk they had faced earlier, and how to deal with that very risk when it strikes. So the plans should start from the village. Santosh Kumar talked about the DRR roadmap of Bihar. We have envisaged, this VDMPs, Village Disaster Management Plans, though the Act talks about the DDMPs onwards, but we envisaged about the VDMP. After a lot of consultation and a lot of deliberation with the experts as well as common people. So the policy certainly is that of the government. The governments have to frame the policies, and then plans, they have to be at the village level to the national level with wide consultations. If a plan is to be prepared at the state level, I prepared my SDMP in 2012, and I consulted not the community, but I consulted, all the government departments, and I know how transferable job everybody is holding. If you talk to a secretary or principal secretary, the other day you're not aware whether he will be in that very department, and he gives his opinion, he gives his feedback, and so when we started preparing this DRR roadmap for the state of Bihar in the context of Sendai, we also contacted some community representatives, some community members. We reached the villagers as well and tried to kind of, learn from them, and certain aspects were included in that DRR roadmap. And from there it emerged that there's a need of training, building capacity of the panchayat levels institutions. Panchayat level institutions, when I say, it means the panchayat level representatives at the village level whose numbers is much more. In my state, the panchayat level representatives, their number is 2.50 lakhs. I've got 8,500 panchayats, and ward commissioners and ward, So we came to the conclusion that when we have to develop a culture of resilience in order to achieve this disaster risk reduction and to ensure that people have the capacity, then we came to know that the resilience have to stand on certain pillars. And which are those pillars? So we could identify the 5 pillars: the resilient villages, resilient cities, resilient critical infrastructure, resilient basic services, and resilient livelihood. So the culture of resilience have to be developed considering all these pillars. If my critical infrastructure is not resilient, then where is the capacity? If it's washed away, if there's a earthquake and the house which I have constructed, investing a lot of money under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and that house collapses, there would be problem for me and also for those who are in the vicinity of that very house. So this resilience of the infrastructure becomes very important. I lose my livelihood. So resilience of my livelihood becomes important. And here lies, the knotty question of building the capacity. Then of course, SOPs, we have prepared SOPs in Bihar. And after preparing SOPs for disaster management of various kinds, for example, I've got, the SOP for managing water crisis. Because, some parts of my state suffer from water crisis during summer. And, it's the beginning of a phase which we call as a drought. Because if there are no rains, there is no water, then, everything starts drying up, the surface water starts drying up, underground water table goes down, then the situation of drought comes. So prior to the onset of drought, one has to solve this water crisis. I've got SOP for that also. I've got SOP for the flood. I've got SOP for the fire. I'm preparing SOP for the earthquake. So SOPs should be there, the systems, procedures, the early warning system. IMD has developed early warning system even for the lightning. Lightning is killing many people, large number of people in my state, Odisha, Jharkhand, and several other states in North. So these are the softwares, the policy should be there, plans should be there, SOP should be there, systems and procedures should be there, and technical capabilities should be there, and they are hardware, and I include in that very hardware the specialized agencies. NDRF is there, SDRF we have set up, SDRF, lot many other states have also set up SDRFs. So you have a specialized agency with equipments you have, and you have trained human resources. So we envisage this capacity building in the context of the resilience, and in the context of these 5 pillars of resilience, which I've just mentioned, in the context of DRR roadmap, and which was prepared in the context of Sendai framework. And Sendai targets gives us, why we are building the capacity. Now, once you decide to build the capacity, then the first capacity is the institutional capacity. For example, NIDM. NIDM is an institution. Ravi is there from IIT Bombay. These technical institutions, they are the institutions, and their capacity to deal with the disasters, to reduce the risk of the disasters, becomes very, very important. And there are several such institutions, and there's a need of building the capacity of such institutions as well. And, they have to learn from others. They have to learn from those even countries who have developed their capacities better than ours. If you say that, everything we have achieved under the sun, I'm not one who will go by this logic. Because Sendai says also international cooperation, my dear friends. So one has to learn from the neighbors, one has to learn from, in-house, but one has to build one's institutional capacity. And, it's possible that Patna IT may not be comparable to the civil engineering department of, IIT Bombay. So there's a need of networking between these institutions. If a particular institution has more capacity, it should be shared with the other ones. That way this capacity sharing, or networking, which I call, will make a state which is deficient in such institutions more capable, of building the capacity of the others. Capacity of the government agencies, because all said and done, ultimately, these are the government agencies which come to the fore, which are criticized or they are applauded, depending on how they are faring. So institution building capacity of institutions, networking between them, and then building capacity of the government agencies, and then community, capacity of the community is very important. When I say community, I mean not only the Panchayati Raj institutions, I mean the community as such. In Bihar, because Santosh asked me to say something about what we are doing in this very field. In fact, we are building capacity of panchayats and urban local bodies in a very big manner. Yes, I mentioned that we have got 2.5 lakh, panchayat representatives, and ULBs have got 144. So not only making VDMPs, not only making CDMPs, but also to train them to make them skillful, the drills which Major General talked about, drills to face the problems, face the music. For example, when earthquake is there, Jhugo Dago Pakdo is one of the drill. But if there is a fire breakout, then there's a lot of things. If somebody is, say, drowning in a river, I've got a lot of rivers. So certainly we need, that skill to kind of save that person who is drowning. Their methods, the wet method, and the dry method, and all kinds of things. And for that, there's a need of the drill. So we are in fact, training panchayats, ULBs. We are preparing, the swimming instructors. We are in fact, training our youths from. We started this very, innovative scheme with the blessings of our Chief Minister, that in every panchayat will have 10 trained manpower, trained youth with a lot of skills as well as equipments. Now, which would also include the first aid kit, etc., etc. That if anything happens in that very vicinity, they would come before the specialized agency join in. And students, someone talked about, I think Santosh talked about the students, the children, the school safety program. We've got 2 crore, children in our schools. And when I say schools, it is not only government schools, it's private schools, it's madrasas, it's Sanskrit schools, it's schools of all types. So we have launched Mukhyamantri Vidyalaya Suraksha Karyakram. And we have launched a program named as Safe Saturday under that. We are training masons in a very big way. I've got 534 blocks. I've got 8,500 panchayats and 534 blocks. In every block, we are in the first phase, we started training 30 masons, at the rate of 30 masons in constructing earthquake resistant buildings. Because, my state is earthquake prone. So just, lest I forget, any capacity building exercise has to take into account the disaster profile of an area. I say disaster is a wide connotations. Which kind of disaster I'm talking about? For example, I'm, making my children learn swimming because, there are a lot of rivers, a lot of ponds. And we learned about, this swimming exercises from Bangladesh. Bangladesh has launched a program by the name of Safe Swim. They launched it in the year 2005. Why? Because, UNICEF conducted a study and Bangladesh came to know that death of children is caused by so many elements, but 40% of deaths are being caused by drowning. So they started the Safe Swim program. We have learned from them and we have customized that program in the context of our needs. My whole of North Bihar is crisscrossed by the rivers, and there are a lot of ponds as well. In the South Bihar also got the ponds. So we are training, we are imparting swimming lessons, and for that we have prepared modules, and we are training the master trainers. Last year we started this very program, but because of COVID, it was stopped. But in this very month, in the March this year, we have started that. And we are going to train the children belonging to the 6 to 18 years age group. Bangladesh trained children belonging to 4 to 12 years age group. But my need is 6 to 18 years age group because even adolescents are dying because of the drowning. So we are training, the youth. We are training the children in the classroom and also out of the classroom for the swimming. So this is the basic purpose of building the culture of resilience among the community, which is the first responder. And then, of course, the government responders. We have got the block level officials. So BDOs, we have got the revenue officials, we call them COs, we call the Bihar Administrative Service, Bihar Police Service. So all these people have to be trained in the disaster risk reduction so that they are not only thinking in terms of relief. So to bring out of this relief mode and to kind of inculcate, this concept of culture of resilience, there's a need of teaching them that DRR is important. It's not only when the time of disaster comes and you go as a responder. So I think my time is going to be up. So building capacity of community becomes very important. Building capacity of the government agencies becomes very important. Institutional capacity becomes very important. And in that building, we look forward to NIDM for help and support. These very words I will conclude by saying that you a very good process of involving states also in your endeavor, and we think that both of us combined together can make India resilient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving a full insight by quoting how to move from dependence into independent, and that dependence syndrome, which have been our practice for state governments in terms of once disaster strikes and we can land up distributing relief. So relief perpetuates relief, and that is that syndrome is a vicious circle which we are into. And to break that, you have a 5 kind of a model of resilience, and that 5 pillars of resilience. That is the model which you talked about, from the villages to the city to infrastructure, and then the services, and then to livelihood. So combining all these, you are taking also that international cooperation, safe swing and lightning and other things which you have mentioned, and the role of national and international institution you have underlined. And you said very rightly that in whole kind of a system of resilience building, we need to change our focus, and we have to move from visible to invisible. And that visibility is the response, and invisible is that recovery, resilience, building resilience, mainstreaming, and so on and so forth. Sir, I would request you to stay with us because lot many questions would come once we finish with the other panelists. But the point which you have started with the Sendai framework, I compliment you and your initiative, the government of Bihar. And we will also listen to how things are being done at the local level, as you said, that masons training, and also the local government and the panchayat training and the capacity building. And recently, which government of Kerala, with the people of Kerala got affected in 2018 and 2019, consecutive flood after 100 years of period. And they also handled the pandemic, as Bihar also handled pandemic. So these two got combined. And in such kind of a situation, that the cascading model we are talking about. So we wish to listen Srimati Sharda Muralidharanji, and Senior Additional Chief Secretary in the local self-department government of Kerala, who has made a wonderful contribution in the state in coming out from the recovery program. So I welcome you, madam, and also on behalf of NIDM, I wish to convey our heartfelt congratulations for the International Women's Day as well. Although it's a matter to be observed every day, but this is a special day which we recognize. So I request you, madam, to kindly address. She belongs to the Indian Administrative Service of 1990 batch, and as I said, that currently she is the Additional Chief Secretary of the state. Over to you, Madam Sharda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting inviting me and giving us an opportunity of explaining what we have been doing by way of capacity building for disaster risk management at the local level. Kerala, as you know, has a history of strong local governments ever since the constitutional amendment, 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments came into place. Our panchayats and local and urban local bodies were very weak before that, but post 1994, from 95 onwards, we've the local governments that came in with a lot of resources, a lot of financial resources, human resources, as well as a lot of authority on the ground. So devolution was very strong from the 90s onwards in Kerala, and that has enabled us or also made us look at local governments as a very important partner in disaster risk management recently. Interestingly, though, before the two floods that you were mentioning, the 2018 and 2019 floods, which were 2018 particularly was a wake-up call to Kerala. It was a call that said that business as usual would not make sense anymore. That Kerala was an extremely fragile ecosystem. That we might not have huge, powerful rivers, but our rivers, if they were flooded, could change their trajectory, could devastate entire stretches of land and people and animals, and that we needed to pay attention and needed to come out with short-term, medium-term, and long-term interventions that, on the one hand, looked at disaster management, but on the other, also moved forward towards climate resilience. Talking of local government, so I was district collector in Trivandrum, in Thiruvananthapuram, 1998. I had just joined when the district had huge rainfall and floods came in. So floods are an annual occurrence, and we were told that there was nothing really to be afraid of, that we might open some 10 to 15 camps, relief camps. We ended up opening over 800 camps because all the 5 rivers of the district were in spate. And as the new collector, I was being flooded with complaints of mismanagement, of delays, and trouble in the relief centers. In an act of desperation, I got our newly minted local governments, panchayats and municipalities to help out. And it was almost a miracle. Within a day itself, the narrative changed from extreme distress and also fault finding of the district administration to singing pains, saying that everything was happening really well and they couldn't have asked for more. And actually, it was all about what local governments brought into play. So, in 1920, the local self-government department, which is the department that I head, decided to go in for a tie-up with the State Disaster Management Authority, because we felt that it was important for us to be able to harness what was happening there, that local governments and their role in disaster management needed to be the first step in capacitation is actually articulation of what exactly is the role, where they stand, what is the scope of engagement, how do they connect with the District Disaster Management Authority, and also whether the resources of the local government could be pooled into the local disaster management effort. So a tie-up was brought up with the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority for initiating these local disaster management plans. And at that point of time, we realized that the Disaster Management Act itself, in Chapter 6, it had a sparse but significant for us mention of the role of the local authorities in disaster management, and how they were themselves also required to prepare plans, which would then feed into the district disaster management plans. So using that as a front, because you would need to know, and I'm sure many of you do, that these are two departments, and then and the departments converging together for a common cause, particularly if that cause might require stepping on each other's toes, is not really very easy to do. So there were questions of who would, what would be the hierarchical relationship between local governments and the disaster authority, the revenue officials in this case. The incident commanders had already been very clearly identified, and they were, however, not a part of the local governance system. In Kerala, we have quite a few institutions ranging from, the agricultural office, the animal husbandry office, the village extension officer, the ICDS network. All of these are regarded as transferred institutions and are located within the local government and function under the local government. They receive funds from the local government, and so they are implementing officers for various schemes. But the revenue administration is independent of this. It does not connect with the local governments in that sense. So this question of interface and clarifying what that interface was between the existing disaster management setup as such and the local bodies, because the local bodies in Kerala are local governments and are extremely powerful in their own right. Each of them handles the gram panchayats themselves are very big panchayats, the biggest in the country, but each of them handles funds to the tune of 10 to 15 crore rupees, which comes out of their own resources, development grant, and also other conditional grants that have been given to the state. And I'm not talking about the centrally sponsored schemes and the funds that come through the centrally sponsored schemes. These are resources which are available to the local governments to plan as they choose. So for us, the challenge was, could we get the local governments out of the experience of the floods, because they had their role again in the rescue and the search and rescue operations, as well as even in early warning, and then going forward into shelter management, had been significant. And that was when the government realized that we had this huge resource there, which we were perhaps not using properly in the whole business of disaster management and response. So what we were trying to do was to get the local governments in their annual plans to come out with a very specific disaster management plan. Now, what was the disaster management plan to contain? It had two components. One component pertained to the situation analysis. So what is the local context of disaster? And we were, since the whole process of planning is very participatory, this was also tried, the effort was to make this participatory. So we had a lot of social media messages and also a campaign done on the ground to get the Gram Sabhas in the municipal areas, the ward Sabhas, to discuss the context of disaster in a big way. We were also looking to avail of community memory of disaster, of lived experience of disaster, and bring that into the local context. We tried to do a vulnerability assessment. So we looked at the vulnerable geographies, the human, institutional, and infrastructural vulnerabilities, and mapped all of that ward-wise and consolidated it panchayat and ULB-wise. We then we'd had teams which were created to do an inventarization of resources that were available. And here too, you looked at human resources. Who were the nurses who were available? Who were the people who knew swimming? For instance, it was mentioned earlier by Sri Vyas about finding good swimmers. Who had the boats? Who had the equipment? Who had the earth movers? What was the infrastructure that was available, including your X-ray machines, CT scanners, etc. And so that inventarization was also done as part of, was supposed to be done as part of the situation analysis. And this whole assessment was done by the community. So this was, how could this be done? Obviously there had to be a facilitation, there had to be a capacity building, which made it happen, which I will be talking about later. But so the community also, particularly in the Gram Sabhas, discussed the contributory factors as well to the situation on hand. And that might include lopsided development, did we?
Your voice is breaking.
Right. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? My
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
okay.
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So the question of community assessment of contributory factors to disaster by way of lopsided development. I mean, did we construct roads which affected flows? Did we convert lands that disrupted development? Did we destroy water sinks and therefore lead to depletion of water of our groundwater? So questions like this and that lived experience was also encapsulated in this document. And interestingly, some local governments, that was not part of our instruction, but some local governments got so much into this that they came out with flyers, brochures. They also organized full-fledged exhibitions, taking people through the history of disaster and the solutions that we needed to come out with in order to ensure that these disasters were that we mitigated these disasters in the long run. So so this was part of what was done, and the second part was to come out with taking this and using this. Could we come out with projects that would actually contribute to disaster management? So the areas of projects that we did give a sampling of what would be the areas that we would like them to come out with interventions. So from awareness generation to early warning systems, search and rescue interventions, shelter management, rehabilitation, and mitigation. So all of these were areas where we asked local governments to invest in on the basis of their understanding of their vulnerabilities. In the area of human resource, it was also about the creation of emergency response teams and their training. There was a significant technological support that was given by way of enhancing the capacity of the local government to plan for this. So GIS, cadastral and satellite maps, the State Disaster Management Authority actually gave us about 25 to 30 maps which could be overlaid one over the other. These were about the roads, these were about the flows, these were about water scarcity areas, so multiple things. This was about infrastructure, these were also about habitations. So we had that the possibility of looking at a layered understanding of how this worked out on the ground. And for every panchayat was given panchayat specific maps that they could work on. I mean, I must say that we got to the extent of getting the panchayat wise maps made, but at that point of time it was too complicated to bring that into the plan. So that's something that we were going to be doing for this current year. The idea of overlaying climate information is something that we think is extremely important and critical to the capacitation of local governance structures to take this on. So the capacity building effort for all of this was it was jointly done by the Disaster Management Authority, and in Kerala there is an institute called the Kerala Institute of Local Administration, which is equal to our SIR. The SIRD is also associated with this, and Kila was the main trainer from the local self-government end. Kila already has this experience of doing organized cascading trainings and has a pool of resource persons. So the first step was, of course, looking at our state resource persons, creating a state resource pool who was a combination of community experts, decentralization experts, but also disaster experts, climate experts coming together, and then they in turn training disaster level, district level resource persons. So we came out with guidelines for and handbooks on disaster management. But we also came out with a omnibus direction in our annual plan guidelines about how and the timelines for doing this entire exercise. The cascading training was organized the way down to the local level. So at the local level, particularly in order to do these communitized surveys and transect walks, etc., the focus group discussions, to facilitate Gram Sabhas, we needed a significant resource pool. And this was before our emergency response team came in, because they came out of the plan. Prior to the plan, we had to have a team that would be able to do this. So we relied heavily on the voluntary resource network and the resource person network of Kila to be able to take that forward. And while we wanted to do Gram Sabhas, particular specific Gram Sabhas for disaster management alone, that unfortunately we were not able to do. But what we did, the second best thing, and which was that at the Panchayat level, there is a development seminar in which the annual plan is finalized. We brought in a development seminar specifically for local body, for the local body disaster management plan. So specific disaster management seminars go ahead in all the local governments of the state, because this being a prior condition, it also meant that if they didn't do this, they would not get their the plan grants. So there was a little bit of that pressure also, compulsion also, which was brought in. So this meant, of course, that we got the document, which was a vulnerability assessment, situation analysis report, and we also got projects which came out. And in Kerala, it is the district planning committee which approves this. So the district planning committee actually is headed by the district panchayat president, and the member secretary is the district collector. These reports, the disaster management plan, which was supposed to be separately given to the DPCs, was then, after approval of the DPCs, had to be sent to the DDMA, and we finally reside with the DDMA. So DDMA could then look at consolidating this information, using this information, and maybe also on the basis of what was coming up, they could use it to fine-tune and improve upon both the local government plan as well as the disaster management plan at the district level. So the next step, of course, is the allocation of finances and projectization by local governments, and we've had that happening. What we did see, however, is that the local governments tended to prioritize the creation of the emergency response teams and their capacity building, plus the provision of equipment for search and rescue. Some of them went into looking at bringing in early warning systems also in place. But for us, there is a bigger challenge, and that is the challenge of rehabilitation and the challenge of mitigation, which is something that we want to keep. We realize that this is an incremental effort. We need to keep on working with the local government to get them to understand and also build community pressure to make the local governance responsive and actually address these imperatives going forward. Interestingly for us, this entire exercise which we had done at the start in 1920, at the start of the year 2021, came in handy in the management of COVID, because we already had a complete inventory and of the availability of resources, particularly infrastructure, that was in place. Because at the very start, Kerala, as you know, was the first state to report COVID, was also the first state to come out with a health emergency and lockdown initiatives. And at a time when the whole world was beginning to just understand how you dealt with this disease, whether you what were the protocols to be put in place, how did you manage this, what contact tracing, etc. In all of that, the local governments could come in a very big way, because they had their voluntary teams already in position. They had done this inventory assessment. They knew the hospitals. They were in touch with both public and private hospitals. They were looking at creating. So they were able to move in and create additional spaces and isolation.
Can I give the conclusion so that we can come back to you the second round punchline? We'll get this what you have to say as a way forward. The second
Yeah,
You
I'm
give
just.
your concluding this as a.
I'm already on my conclusions.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, because my conclusion was about the effect of the training that we had done, which was I was talking about. So voluntary participation was something which was significantly expressed in the way COVID was managed: community kitchens, home deliveries, ward level committees, even in counseling, etc. So you found that a new dimension to how and a greater nuanced understanding of how local communities could get involved in disaster management at the local level was something that the Kerala experience of participatory planning for local disaster management plans taught us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for shown in terms of that after Bihar, that you have mentioned that how at the local level what Vyasji had identified issues at the local, and Kerala is a very distinct. I myself said during 2018 and 2019 floods, and we could see with our own eyes that how the local self-government was working in the different parts of the city and most of the towns. And the role of these two institutions in terms of the state disaster authority and also the district disaster authority and who is chairing. Many of the state, it was the district collector who is heading the district disaster authority, and also, but here in the local self-government, you are saying that the disaster authority is being headed by the Punjab secretary is the collector, if I have understood you correctly.
No.
And
may I clarify? No, that is
please,
not true. The disaster management authority is headed by the district collector. The DPC, the
okay, and the committee
is headed by the
okay.
district.
The DPC committee is headed by the okay. I stand corrected. Thank you. So this is a very interesting thing to note, and that how Kerala been managing the capacity development program, and how that public awareness program was disseminated to the larger audience by information, education, communication. And also that we say that it's not the talking about the concept, but also projectizing the concept into the program. And that project, you mentioned that how many projects are being taken up, and the application of science and technology going as a part of the capacity when we are doing this risk assessment. Thank you very much at this point of time, which is the point which you have mentioned. And I go back to, now I will go back to Orissa government. Orissa government, Bihar, we have listened, Kerala is a different example altogether, where you mentioned about that COVID started from there and now how you manage the COVID along with other disasters. And now that Orissa is another state, which is having a recurring kind of a disaster almost every year as a cyclone storm. And what kind of capacity development they actually recommend to this forum, that if any national plan is to be drafted for the capacity development, how that capacity should be seen, as Bihar has flagged certain issues, you have flagged certain issues. And then we will, after Orissa, we'll have a comprehensive from Professor Ravi Sinha, who has been in the last, so we can say 20-25 years in the disaster management. So he will consolidate his experience, and then again the second round we will take up on each of the states what we have been consolidating. And we also request all the distinguished participants who are there to please put in chat box your questions, so that we can arrange it to the panelists what they have said and the other experiences which we wish to do. So now I request Mr. Kapil Mishra, Executive Director of the Orissa State Disaster Authority, to share that Orissa's thing and what kind of a way forward he would suggest in terms of capacity development, which we should be taking.
So thank you, Professor Santosh Kumar ji. I think I'm audible. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So it's a great pleasure to be invited to this August gathering to share our experiences. I have prepared a small presentation containing a small video film of 5 minutes and 10 to 12 minutes of PowerPoint presentation. So before going that, starting that, I just welcome the distinguished panelists as well as the participants of this webinar and Professor Santosh Kumar and Executive Director with NIDM for organizing this wonderful event. So now I share my screen. Yes. So the topic is Atmanirbharta in capacity building and disaster risk reduction. That is containing the Odisha experience, our experience in dealing with disasters for last almost 21 years of our existence with disaster after the super cyclone in 1999. And the most interesting part is that the capacity building has been the strong way or the mainstay of our entire disaster management activities in our state. So OSDMA, the first disaster management authority of our country, virtually provides its maximum thrust to the capacity building of all stakeholders at all levels of government, including the Panchayat Raj institutions and the stakeholders like the non-government organizations, civil society and others. So I seek permission to start this. The interesting part of this presentation is that the contents of the video are all indigenous. The training curriculum, the training trainers, master trainers, and also the content of the training material, all are indigenously developed by OSDMA with the help of our existing ODRAF, Odisha Disaster Rapid Action Force personnel. And most interesting is that the video itself, what you are going to see, is indigenously
Mohana, can you check this? What is
it visible?
now it's visible?
Sir,
You go ahead.
yes, sir, the video is visible.
It's video, no? So that is why it's moving.
Yeah. Here, so to start with, the whatever the guiding principles of Atmanirbhar vision of Honorable Prime Minister of our country. So we have I have gone through the entire policy framework containing the concept of Atmanirbharta. So I have tried to identify the areas where capacity building could take up the entire framework within itself. So it has a policy framework component. There is a legislative formulations concept which is needed for anything that needs to be done, and then to identify the sectors where interventions in capacity building are would be required. And of course, we will be needing an operating environment, because without an operating environment suitable to capacity building at the pan-India, or rather to say catering to the local requirements, specific requirements of the local community. So we need to develop such type of operating environment. And of course, there is a financial support which is required to develop the Atmanirbharta in capacity building so far disaster risk reduction is concerned. So I decided to go through the formulations of the Atmanirbhar project, as well as the compliance, or the rather to say what are existing within our system right now for capacity building, or in the field of capacity building in disaster risk management or disaster risk reduction. And I have come out with this. There is a policy framework for Atmanirbharta. And we have our own disaster management act, national disaster management plan, national and state policies, and all different types of policy documents governing different state governments and the national government. So some set of compliance is available. So for policy framework of Atmanirbharta concept is that. Next is the legislative formulations. We need some legislative support available with us. So for capacity building is concerned, just like the policies or the government's directive for formulation of disaster management authorities and etc. But we need strengthening in this field, and new regulations on capacity building are needed. And at the national level as well as the state level, we can take up these legislative formulations to support the existing network. The institutional framework needs modification, but whatever the existing institutional network we have and the framework we are operating within, we need to slightly modify that to meet the concept of Atmanirbhar without depending on the external forces. The third one is the sectoral identification of training needs, because India is a vast country and almost all the states are having their specific problems, specific areas of vulnerabilities and requirements. And mostly in a particular state itself, there are different areas prone to different types of disasters, and response as well as training needs will be different. So we have right now the rudimentary framework available with us, because training needs are not entirely identified. In piecemeal, we have been doing this. The training needs assessment to be future ready. It's my opinion, because whatever we are doing is based on our past experience, and past experience is not exactly what is translated into action for our future. So the training needs assessment has to be done in a perfect way so as to guide us to meet the future requirements in disaster risk reduction. The professionals are required in the field, because whatever we have right now are the non-government organization people who are working on project mode, and government servants who are on a transport mode. So whatever we have right now, the resource persons, these are all on personal contact, etc. And in the government system, the concept of professionalism is yet to crop in. So we need to identify professionals so far in the government system is concerned, and incorporate those professionals into the disaster management capacity building framework. So for operating environment is concerned, we have come to know that national institutions are available. like National Institute of Disaster Management or other national institutions like MHA and mountaineering institutes like Lal Bahadur Shastri Mountaineering Institute. So certain national institutions are available, but we need further strengthening because the capacity of these national institutions is somehow not fully either fully utilized or not available to all the stakeholders who are seeking their assistance. So we need to have a robust operating environment to be Atmanirbhar in capacity building for disaster risk management. Then regional and state institutions needed standard operating procedures. So regional and state institutions are needed where to divert the load from the national institutions, but simultaneously without compromising the quality or the on the universality of the capacity building to be adopted for our country. Then standard operating procedure for capacity building, because I come to see that whenever ODRAF, Odisha Disaster Rapid Action Force, is going ahead in a disaster response activities and NDRF people are here, sometimes I feel they have a different approach to a particular problem and they are not programmed to work in tandem with each other. So we need to have a standard operating procedure for different types of response activities where 2 or 3 or 5 different stakeholding organizations are working or are supposed to work together. So I am in favor of the standard operating procedure to be, this has to be prepared in consultation with all the stakeholders. And we in Odisha, we have been doing it continuously with the help of NDRF and ODRAF so that maximum cohesion could be developed. Then there we need a knowledge how to guide the stakeholders, because that is one of the major areas where operating environment is lacking in India. So we need to have a knowledge how that may be virtual, that may be in reality, that may be existing inside the existing national institutions like NIDM, etc. But we need to have a knowledge how to support the states and the other stakeholders. And of course, regarding financial support, the funding framework is available within us, with us right now in our country. There is National Disaster Risk Management Fund, there's National Reduction Mitigation Fund, there's the National Disaster Response Fund, and SDRF, SDMF are there. But the point is that these are required to be modified on the basis of the needs, because in NDMA in recent times has been discussing with the different states continuously for modification in the guidelines of SDRF, NDRF, and NDMF. So this needs to be modified in such a way to cater to the requirements of the states across the country, depending on the requirement as well as the different disasters they are facing. So this is the concept that has come to me so far to develop Atmanirbharta in capacity building. So we need to have a bottom-up approach to develop the environment of capacity building in the country, because capacity building is somehow considered as a non-important or non-priority sector, especially in government systems. So whenever we conduct a training program, it is considered or taken with a pinch of salt. That needs to be changed. Unless that is changed, we cannot achieve anything. We are very sure that we are products of our training. So unless there is a perfect structured way of training available to almost, especially for the government servants who are the permanent stakeholders of the system, I think it will be extremely difficult to have Atmanirbharta in capacity. The next is making panchayats and grassroots community organization training ready, because they have their different mandate. The Panchayat Raj institutions, the Sarpanch, the ward members, the Panchayat Samiti members, etc. They have their mandate, political as well as others. But certainly not, they are not training ready. Neither they are trained nor they are interested in training others. So we need to have a framework which will compel them somehow with the legislation, otherwise with the government guidelines, etc., to have them being training ready. The third one is the preparing the self-sustainable capacity building framework at all levels. My capacity building framework will not be applicable to other states. And the capacity building framework I have, or rather to say a state has, may not be applicable to the national system. So we have to be a self-sustainable capacity building framework which will sustain itself without depending much on the external assistance, because whenever there is external assistance required, it will not be very sustainable in the long run. The state disaster management authorities have to take a lead in this. They must have their own capacity building cell, or rather to say capacity building branch, very strong and robust branch available to be doing all these things. Then we need to have a pool of master trainers in government and local NGO level, because unless we have a master trainers, a group of master trainers on our own, because we have learned it from our experience of training, taking up the training and capacity building of Odisha Disaster Rapid Action Force personnel, fire service personnel and others, that the master trainers we have created over a period of time, they have proven to be far better, because they know what is the problem with their core members, with their brothers and sisters who are in the same profession, and they also are better communicator to make them understand. And number three, they try to have a peer pressure on the personnel to learn something which is already learned by their superiors or their seniors. The last one is creating a training curriculum aligned with the needs of the people. Because we have a series of curriculum available with us, imparted by different training institutions across the country, in different parts of the country. But the curriculum is sometimes rarely aligned with the needs of our people or the corporate sector. Sometime before I had the opportunity of designing a small course for one of the management institutes in Odisha. And I had designed a course, and very interestingly, their concept of learning disaster management as a special paper was what business they could get out of that knowledge. They are not averse to learning, but they are they're interested that their knowledge must bring them some earning, and that needs to be kept in mind while designing a course. Some things like climate change, sustainable development, goal budgeting, these are new concepts to many of the stakeholders in our country. So a training curriculum aligned with the needs of the people is essentially required to keep ourselves Atmanirbhar in capacity building. Then we come to the Atmanirbharta Odisha experience. We have done in-house preparation of the capacity building framework for the state. WIS team has prepared a capacity building framework. We have consulted departments, district administrations, sub-district level officials, non-government organizations, also the response forces and Panchayat Raj institutions to prepare it. The draft document is available, and we are working on it to make it foolproof as far as possible. Then the State Institute of Adjustment, which was conceptualized in 2013 after the severe cyclonic storm Phylline, and in its precursor, the DMTC, the Disaster Management Training Cell, is right now operating, and the building infrastructure of the NIDM is going up. And so the concept is we need to have a training infrastructure available in each state to cater to the requirements of the local people. Then training need assessment. Training need assessment has been done in consultation with stakeholders, knowledge institutions, the beneficiaries themselves. So that is somehow better done than to be sorry in the future. Then OSDMA, which is the nodal agency for capacity building in our state, it is virtually the arms and legs of the State Disaster Management Authority, which is a statutory body. So we have taken it on ourselves, the responsibility of capacity building so far disaster management is concerned. We have funding available under the SDRF, the State Disaster Response Fund, because 20% of the fund is available for capacity building, and almost each state is having good amount of funds. So funds is not a constraint in our country. In a state like Odisha, we have a corpus of around 2,200 crores per year, SDRF, so around 20%, around 400 crores we have. So it is something like that. So apart from that, we have also CSR funding, which can be utilized for capacity building. Then I have already mentioned about the master trainers. Then we have developed a skill matrix for our structured capacity building. I will be speaking slightly elaborately in the next subsequent slides. Then coming to the capacity building, Odisha experience, just I'll be explaining what exactly we have been taking. We have divided the entire capacity building concept into basic
Request
three.
little faster. Little faster. Kamal.
Yes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes more. That's all. So this is the awareness level training program we have taken up, which is conducted by the ODRAF and others. Then there is operational level training program we conduct, because it's purely hands-on. This is slightly in higher level of training, which is imparted to the volunteers. Then the community awareness program, because this is the outreach program we have to we conduct for the students, for the NGOs, for the community members and Panchayat Raj institutions. Then we take the shelter level training of task force volunteers, because with each shelter, we have around 900 shelters, and each shelter has a task force of 50. So this is an outreach program for them. Then Abda Mitra, everybody knows, because this is a national program and we have been taking up quite seriously. Then these are the different areas of, we have identified the the capacity building areas of the ODRAF into different parts, combining them in the main machine and material combination. And interestingly, we have developed a skill matrix to measure the capacity of each individual Jawan in different components, in different facets of disaster management, relating to water rescue, collapse exercise, and rescue relief line, etc., etc. So this is a simple numeric scale which can judge the capacity of each ODRAF Jawan for further reference. So we have conducted so many batches of training program for us in the disaster management training cell, and mock drill is a concept we every year we conduct, and before every disaster season it is conducted across the state. The familiarization exercise is something we have learned from our NDRF, and we have been taking up for our own people. So this is the last slide, and I need to just highlight, this is my submission before the August gathering. This is the roadmap I have checked out for discussion and for consideration. We need a national framework for capacity building. Then we need to have a national intellectual resource repository. The capacity building institutional mechanism may be defined. What the state will do, what the national level institutions will support. The national level institution corporates to provide training support to stakeholders on a pan-India scale. Because unless there is a national level support mechanism available, we cannot be Atmanirbhar in capacity building. Then we have to identify international knowledge institutions, and with engagement mechanism to do that at the national level, because each one communicating with them, with those persons, those institutions will not be very robust system. Then we need to have a national level capacity building guidance cell to guide the state and sub-districts, district level authorities on a regular basis. Then developing a standardized disaster management curriculum, I have already explained. Without that, we have a difficulty in coordinating with each other. Then we must have an online evaluation and certification system so that people will be interested to evaluate themselves and get a certificate, so that those certificates will be beneficial to them in their career plan. Then Atmanirbhar Bharat vision must have a platform for capacity building in disaster risk reduction. So friends, I think that is the end of my presentation, and now the field is open for discussion if time permits.
Thank you, Dr. Lochan Mishra. Kamal has been always very kind of a methodical while making presentation, and things have been very clearly spelled out. Thank you very much. And you have brought many issues that to be taken by NIDM and institution like NIDM who are looking at the national. So I am happy that you have brought those issues, whether need assessment or capacity development or master trainer or TOT and all gamut of capacity development matrix-based solutions. Thank you very much, Dr. Mishra. I would now request Ravi Sinha. He has been waiting since its starting of the program, but I wanted him to actually give the overall consolidation in terms of that he has been seeing NIDM since its inception, and also engaged in the DRR process of capacity development in the country from the technical institution, but also in many of the committees and this of the Government of India, National Disaster Authorities, Ministry of Home Affairs. And so I would request him to highlight those issues that now we have seen in COVID-19 and then progressing further, how we should plan this capacity development program. You have also listened to the 3 states and also General Bindal, what he has highlighted in the beginning. Professor Ravi Sinha. Engineering, and he's part of interest from the earthquake engineering. So we have learned many things. So Professor Ravi Sinha. We unmute yourself. Mohana, can you, Professor Ravi Sinha?
I have given him presenter rights and I have already unmuted him. If he starts speaking, we will be able to listen to him.
Ravi, can you speak? Acha, you are not able to. Mohana, just check that. What is the problem?
Yes, sure. Sir, I will request you to try without your earphones once. Sometimes there's the issue with connectivity with the earphones. So if you can remove the earphone and just try speaking from the system itself. This is again relogged in through his link. So I think we should wait for another 1 or 2 minutes. He is in the process of reconnecting.
Meanwhile, can you see any questions?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. Now we can hear
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank NIDM for inviting me to this very important webinar. And I would like to congratulate NIDM for taking up this very important issue of Atmanirbharta, basically self-capacity and self-help as a concept. At national level, also, we know how important this has emerged in various facets, and in disaster risk management, it has particular relevance. So that is why I'm very happy to be a part of this particular discussion. Also, I want to thank the 3 speakers giving the perspective of Bihar, Kerala, and also of Odisha. The tremendous gains which have been made and the fantastic initiatives which have been taken in those states in terms of improving the overall disaster risk management capacity. What I would do is, based on drawing on the experience which I have had at various places over the last couple of decades, I would like to look at this thing with a slightly broader perspective and looking at both the gains as well as the challenges which lie ahead of us. So what I would like to do is to first see where we are compared to the past. And really, the concerted or the systematic disaster risk management initiatives started from the 1970s in some of the more advanced economies. And then in the 1990s, which was the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, that is when you can say the disaster risk management as a system got democratized worldwide. And many of the countries of the world, both in the developed economies and in the developing economies, started looking at disaster risk management as a more important, you can say, governance issue than what used to be in the past. And India also started systematically looking at this issue from the 1990s onwards. And I believe that every year, as a nation, we are better than the previous year. But also we have to look at exactly where the gains are with respect to the risks which we face. And when we look at that, then the situation is more sobering. So if I look at the global data, then from the 1970 onwards, what we find is that every decade, the number of deaths due to natural disasters has been greater than that in the previous decade. So notwithstanding whatever are the gains made through, from the 1990s, for example, in the 30 years since then, in every decade, the death has been more than in the previous decade. We are nearly 3 months into the new decade of the 2020s, and we are hoping that through the lessons which are being learned and through the concerted effort of all the right-minded people, maybe this is the decade when we start reversing the trend. But actually, the deaths have increased every decade, and not just death. The per capita exposure to people to hazards has increased every decade. And when I said death increase, it's not just in absolute number; it is also factoring for the increase in population. Then economic losses have increased exponentially more on a per decade basis, again at a constant value of currency compared to the previous decade. And what all these say is that if the efforts which have been done were not there, then the situation may have been catastrophic for many of the communities and many of the economies. But even with what has been done, the situation is very grim. We actually need to move to a totally different level of disaster risk management. And also the key gaps or the key points of weaknesses are now becoming more apparent, not just in terms of where the gaps are, but also what can be done about them. And this is the place where Atmanirbharta or the concept of self-reliance becomes very important. If we look at you can say the initiatives around the world, including in India, most of the focus at the community level has been in improving response capacity. And a lot has been done, and a lot more has to be done in that direction. So that is a good thing which we have been doing, and we should continue to strengthen that. In addition to that, there are also other things where local level initiatives have to be taken in a very, very different way, or maybe started for the first time. So, for example, in disaster risk management, the people who actually work in disaster risk management, what we always say is that the hazards may be widespread, the disasters may be widespread, losses are individualized. It's an individual who suffers the losses. It's the family of the individual who suffers the losses. They are the ones who face the brunt of the disaster. So disaster risk management has to now move to putting the families and the individuals at the center in the way it has never been done in the past. So not only are they to be looked at objects whose risks have to be reduced or who have to be provided better succor in the event of a disaster, but they have to be looked at as the people who have to be at the center of risk reduction strategy. If they don't feel that they have an onus to reduce their risk, then it is very difficult to reverse the global trend we have been observing on a decadal basis. So the question is, how do we do that? So some of the things, of course, are being done. For example, improving the local level capacity to respond to both emerging as well as post-event disasters. Then also local level data collection, identification of elements at risk, by having various systems of local level data collection has also been done in some of the places. So tapping community knowledge. But that is not enough. That has to be integrated into the overall framework of disaster risk management. And in most of the countries, the framework of disaster risk management is skewed in the sense that where the resources lie and where the responsibility of preventing their own losses lie, there is a mismatch between the two. So most of the resources and the decision making of the resources are by people who are not directly affected themselves. So that mismatch requires more democratization, you can say, which means that there has to be more delegation of responsibilities, more delegation of decision-making powers going down to the units which are most directly impacted by disasters. And if we do that, and if we do it in a very systematic, structured way, then it turns out that that is exactly what Atmanirbharta is also advocating. So it's a win-win for everybody to do that, but we have to move in that direction. Some of the examples I can quote from Mumbai, for example, how do you prevent or how do you reduce the rapid accumulation of risk? So everybody knows that the risk is being accumulated if you talk to the community, but everybody also feels that the effort to reduce the accumulation of risk would adversely affect them more than the others. So this is a sense that the impact would be, say, a community-wide, but the effort to prevent it in terms of foregoing opportunities or reducing options for economic advancement because of that is more individual. And this is seen even in things like, say, at the local level, when you have to take steps to stop pollution, for example, it's seen the same thing, that reduction of pollution would have a societal or a global gain, but the economic crisis which may bring to the local level would be then very individualized. So there's a mismatch because of which the effort to reduce that accumulation of that risk gets affected. And so what we have been seeing again and again, so for example, people living in illegal squatters, people living in areas which are more prone to various risks compared to other areas, people's desire to pay a little bit more and move out of more vulnerable areas to less vulnerable areas are not that easy when we actually go down and try to understand how the community thinks. And that is always happening because this whole concept of Atmanirbharta has not yet reached their psyche, their way of thinking. So when we talk about community-based disaster risk management, what I'm trying to say is that we should build on the gains which have been talked about earlier, and go down to the locals as the unit to whom we would like to see the possible positive impact. And this is not just somebody going and telling them. This is their internalizing the concept of risk, and they are internalizing what action they can take on that basis. And so lastly, I would like to say, I just want to keep it short. Lastly, I would like to say that this will not happen automatically, or this will not happen just because people want to do. This requires, say, a structured system for doing it. And the local self-government appears to be the most competent body to take this to the people. And that would require empowering and strengthening local self-government a lot more than what has been done in the past. And there are efforts, of course, to further strengthen them. But strengthening is not just in say, delegating more powers to them, but also delegating more resources, making them more independent in terms of developing the ability to take financial and policy decisions. They need to get used to taking more and more policy decisions in order to take these very, very tough decisions which go into reducing the risk. I'd just like to sum up over here to say that notwithstanding everything which we have done in the past, actually the number of people dying and the losses are increasing every decade. And we need to do a lot more than what we have done in the past to reverse that trend. And also, most of this increase we are seeing in developing countries like India, and it is affecting our ability to give better, say, quality of life to our citizens than what we would have been able to do with the resources which we had. And this is a win-win kind of situation for all of us, and we need to move more in that direction. So thank you very much.
We are not negating what we have been able to do in the past, say, 20 years. The scientific institution and scientific mind, science, and that the economic losses and the number of deaths are increasing. So we can have been able to do that, but also on the other hand, that maybe the disaster size will increase intensity of, also that large number of frequencies, the possible validation correlation could be established that why it is happening. And you said that you also said, and the Commission also said that there is need to go for the reverse pyramid, building local capacity that coming 5 years, 10 years, we should focus this local panchayat and gram panchayat level. And what that we have listened from the Kerala, what Sardaji has said about that, the all into that Bihar, as he said that we are building medicines capacity and all capacity in those manners. So maybe we just want to queries on this. What is the possibility you see in reverse pyramid approach execution? What would be the pragmatic way of moving? This question would to you, Ravi, and also Kamal Lochan Mishraji, and also Sardaji, because other states are not that much strong in building in the local level. So how that would be percolated down when we NIDM and other institution can think of reverse pyramid? Professor Sinha. Again, your voice is not coming.
Sorry. So yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, this issue cannot be looked at in isolation, only talking about disaster risk management. Ultimately, it's a governance issue. So all aspects of governance at the local level are interlinked to one another. So at the local level, if the local self-government, both in the urban areas as well as in the rural area, the PRIs, if they are empowered to take more decisions, and I differentiate the ability to take decision from the ability to implement programs. Of course, they need to be more efficient and better in implementing programs. But beyond that, if they are empowered to get used to taking more decision and basically living with those decisions, which means being able to defend the correct decision and be able to learn and correct the incorrect decisions. Unless we do that, it becomes very difficult to consistently take the correct decisions at the local level. So empowering going down to providing more decision-making power, and coupled with that, more financial autonomy is the direction to go into.
Thank you. Sardaji, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, just I wanted to what Professor Ravi Sinha has said and what you had mentioned about that. I just wish to know that he's talking about holistically, and we talk about the local level governance, the political delegation, executive delegation, and financial delegation, which makes complete local government empowerment. Kerala example is almost on all the three lines. How do you suggest that other states can think of capacity development drive when you have what you took in Kerala? Sardaji. Sajay, can you respond to our question?
We are able to hear you.
Probably she is muted or what?
Sir, she is muted. I think her connectivity issue is there because we have lost her. She is unmuted only.
If Kamal Lochan Mishra is there, then we can have his response on the same question. How to go, what Ravi Sinha has suggested, the reverse pyramid, and you also said. Kamal?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
So my suggestion is that whatever Professor Sena has mentioned is really the way to go ahead. And we have already started utilizing such type of concept in Odisha, creating a state level framework and taking the matter bottom up from the community level, like cyclone shelter management or maintenance committees and panchayat raj institutions. So our state level framework has the concept of preparing the resource material, resource persons, and with the help of the departments and the grassroots level organizations, starting from the panchayat raj institution level, that is the sarpanch. So that is the concept we are now depending, and we are now taking into account different organizations which are to provide us with logistics support and to fan out to across the state, so that at the field level there will be the presence of state level organizations like OSDMA, the logistics support and other support provided by the agencies, the professional agencies, or rather to say government agencies like Mission Shakti or State Institute of Rural Development, something like that, and the Panchayat Raj and the grassroots level government officials and public representatives. So that is the framework now we are working on. Apart from that, the professional and specialized trainings meant for the fire service, Woodruff and other such personnel, civil defense, that is now being taken up parallelly at the state level. So this is the framework we are now working, and for last 20 years, this has somehow worked to a certain satisfaction level, and there is scope for improvement, but somehow if nothing better is available or could be done, I think this is one of the best ways of going ahead with it.
Thank you very much for pointing out that initiatives taken by you, and also that you said that we need to professionalize the whole concept of capacity development. And Professor Ravi Sinha and you and Sarda ji also said that it should be at what level, so that professionalization, maybe the national resources, international resources, but also have to be integrated at the local level. Sarda ji, do you have a point to share quickly if you are connected? Mohana, can you check that?
She is not from her side. I think the connectivity is a little bit weak, so we are unable to hear her. That is the issue. She is there otherwise.
Comment, then we can say after your comment we will wind up in terms of just quickly what you have said.
So thank you. So I have only two suggestions to make in this. One is that make the 73rd and 74th amendment more real to a larger number of local self-government. So that is my first suggestion, that it should be done more rigorously, the implementation and the effectiveness of that implementation. That is number one. And number two is that there has to be a much greater effort in communicating risk. Risk is not understood by the local community the way groups like ours understand it. And that may be one of the reasons why they do not put the same emphasis we would like them to put. So risk communication has to be done in a far more effective manner, and using the concepts which are relevant to them and not necessarily the concepts which are relevant at the national or the state level. So more empowerment at the local level and better risk communication are, I think, the two starting points.
Ravi, thank you very much that you said. Mohana, would you like to say that Sri Sardaji is there, or we can close now?
No, sir. I'll just request her once more if she's there. Sharda ma'am, are you able to hear us?
I'm afraid I missed out on most of the discussion post the presentation, so that I don't think it will be fair on me to make a comment at this point. But thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. We missed you in between. The connection got lost, but we will get back to you maybe when we prepare a report, and we would learn from you that how local level capacity development. All the panelists have said that we should go and see that how the kind of a reverse pyramid approach is working very well in Kerala. So thank you very much being with us, and Professor Ravi Sinha and Sardaji, Vyasji, and also Kamal Lochan Mishra, with few points take away, which I would mention in terms of that we should be seeing capacity development holistically, and that should be seen as in terms of that how it is going to affect the life lost and the kind of it is happening impact, and then the reduction of those risks on a regular basis. Then we have to build a culture of resilience, and that to the 5 pillars framework which was discussed. And then fourth is that we talked about the capacity development about this at the panchayat and below level. This is not only needed at this as a kind of very professionalized approach we need to have, and we need to develop professionals in the area of disaster risk management at all level, policy level, national level, state level, and also at the local level. And that idea of this in the context of cascading model, which we need to and revisit entire capacity building process, and we have to have a policy, separate policy on the capacity development in the. So with this, I would say thank you once again to all the panelists, distinguished delegates who have joined, and Anna for coordinating from our side. I want to say the thanks, Mona, to everyone formally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Santosh Kumarji.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I place a formal vote of thanks to our chief guest, Shri Vyasji, Vice Chairman of Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, our Executive Director for Major General Manoj Kumar Bindalji for his overview. And I, at the same time, extend my thanks to all the delegates present today. Srimati Sarda Mullidharan, ma'am, Additional Chief Secretary at the Local Self Department at Government of Kerala. Dr. Kamal Lochan Mishra, sir, Executive Director of OSDMA. And Professor Ravi Sinha, sir, from IIT Bombay. And lastly, I would also thank Professor Santosh Kumar, sir, for convening this program so beautifully and conducting this program so beautifully. With that, I would end today's webinar. Thanks again all the delegates. And I also thanks all the participants for their active participation and for being patiently with us till so late in the evening. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you, Lochanji. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.